Well, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, depending on where you are. Happy Friday, and thanks for joining us for another 15-minute Featured Friday. My name is Stephen Moore. I'm a senior solution engineer on the pre-sale engineering team here in Americas, and I am specifically based in the Southeast, in Florida, actually. And today I am going to be covering a fun topic, a little bit different than some of our previous 15-minute Feature Fridays. And it's actually first part of a two-part series on an introduction to what we call Milestone PS tools. We'll talk a little bit about that, but we'll go ahead and get started. So if you've ever sat in on a Milestone sales presentation, you've probably heard us talk about a bit about our value proposition and about who we are as a company. And at some point, we've talked about end-to-end versus an open platform approach. We probably showed you some slides. We talked to you about our large number of integration partners. We've talked about Marketplace. We've talked about how we support over 10,000 different devices. This is all part of our open platform approach. And then we also probably at some point told you about our MIP SDK and about how anybody can develop into Milestone. However, at the end of that, you probably asked, how does open actually help you directly? And maybe you didn't ask that, but that's what we're going to answer today. Because not only can being an open platform help solution partners build platforms on top of this, and not only can that mean we can support over 10,000 different devices and you can actually write your own device drivers into our system, but this also means that you can expand on the system directly, even without that much technical knowledge. And with that, we're going to introduce our main topic today, which is the Milestone PS tools. So what is Milestone PS tools? Well, in short, it is a Windows PowerShell module that is designed to interact with the Milestone integration platform software development kit and requires no coding in .NET Framework languages. Essentially, it is a library of over 140 different commandlets that allow you to manage the system, configure, and monitor XProtect. I think it's better to show you what Milestone PS tools is, so that's what most of this session is going to be based on. So I really only have two slides that I'm going to cover with you about this, and the first one's going to be some requirements. So what do you need to use Milestone PS tools? Well, essentially, you need to be running any of our current C-code XProtect products. So it's going to be XProtect Corporate, Expert, Professional Plus, Express Plus, and heck, you can even use our free one, Essential Plus. You need to be on 2014 or newer. I sure hope you are, but you need to be on that. And you also need to be running .NET Framework 4.7. So obviously, if you're running any of the newer versions of XProtect, you're probably already running this, but that is a requirement. You need to be on PowerShell 5.1. This is pretty much included with any current updated operating system. However, if you don't have PowerShell 5.1, you can actually install this yourself. And then the only other requirement is basically, we're going to talk about this before we do the install, but basically having PowerShell's execution policy set to a remote side. And this is actually the default state that comes in out of the box. However, domain policy and other group policies can actually affect this. So how do we do an installation of Milestone PS tools? Well, there's two different ways you can do it. We have an offline method. The offline method will allow you to basically download the individual modules and copy them directly into the PowerShell module directory. I'm not going to cover this today. You can look at our knowledge base article. I'm actually going to link to this knowledge base article in the chat here in a little bit, but it's 14686. It's a great article. It was actually linked to in the registration link of this webinar as well. Today, we are going to cover the online installations. Basically, any computer with internet access, we can install Milestone PS tools using the PowerShell built-in commandlet install module. All of the required modules are hosted on PowerShell Gallery, which is a website that Microsoft hosts. And it will automatically install the Milestone PS tools module, as well as the required prerequisites, which is going to be the NuGet and the MIP SDK redistributable. So with that said, we're actually going to jump right into a live demo, and most of this is going to be a live demo. I haven't timed this out. It is highly likely that we'll go over 15 minutes today. And we're going to kind of progressively go through different different scenarios with PowerShell. So just to let you know, this is the first of a two-part series. So come back next month on May 21st. My colleague Carl is going to be covering the second part of this, where we're going to dive a bit deeper and talk about kind of creating your own custom scripts and own custom functions within Milestone PS Tools. But like I said, let's go ahead and dive right into a live demo. What I'll go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and drag this guy over here and make it full screen. And as we go along, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the question bank. I'll be sure to cover those at the end. We're going to give that just a moment to resize, and we'll go ahead and get started. So while I'm waiting for that to resize, I'm going to put two links in the chat over here, and hopefully this goes to the entire audience. The first one is going to be a link to that knowledge base article I just discussed, which is knowledge base article number 14686, which is basically the how to use Milestone PS Tools PowerShell module. This will walk you through installation online and both offline. The main creator of Milestone PS Tools, Josh Hendricks, actually has a walkthrough video on there that will cover some of this. We also have a few examples on here. Now, the second link I'm going to send you is a GitHub repository, which I'm putting in the chat right now. And this is going to give you some more in-depth code examples of different scenarios. You can actually go to this link and hit samples, and you'll see a number of different samples in here for things you can do. I'm not going to spend too much time on these. These are deliverables you can take with you and cover at a later time. So today we're going to go ahead and get started directly with a blank system. So this is a lab system I have. It's actually an XProtect system with no cameras on it. I don't have any cameras currently on here, and I actually don't have any roles either. It's pretty much a brand new system. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to open up PowerShell console. And I'm going to make this just a bit bigger so you all can see it. I already turned up the font size a little bit, but I'm hoping everybody can see this well. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So one of the first things that you have to do, actually you don't have to do this, but one of the first things you should do is check to make sure you have a supported version of PowerShell. And we can do this by typing in the git host command or git host commandlet. And basically this is going to come back with a version number. So 5.1 is our required version to run this Milestone PS tool. So we're good there. We also want to verify that our execution policy of PowerShell is in a supported state. So I can do that by typing in the git execution policy command and hit enter. And I'll see that I'm right now working under a remote signed execution policy. And that's what we need for this to work. We can actually do a list command. You can see all of the different execution policies that are currently configured on the system. So right now I'm running as a local administrator. So I'm actually running as the local machine as remote signed. If you need to change it, you can always come in here and do a set execution policy and change to a remote signed execution policy. Just note that undefined is going to inherit the default configuration, which by default is a restricted configuration, which means you're not going to be able to run any code that isn't basically not going to be able to run any code. Because I've met my prerequisites, I'm going to go ahead and clear my screen. And I am going to go ahead and start an installation of Milestone PS Tools. And as simple as typing in install module, so install module, and the module I want to install, so Milestone PS Tools. Case doesn't matter, but it looks pretty. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. I'm going to wait for it to think for a moment. Now it's going to ask us if we want to trust the PowerShell gallery. For this to work, you have to hit yes. So we're going to go ahead and hit yes. And now we're going to go ahead and install two different modules. We're going to install the MIP SDK redistributable, which is a prerequisite and basically is what Milestone PS Tool uses. And then we're going to install the PS Tools commandlets. And now we're done. So how do we know if that installed correctly? Well, we can actually type in git module. This will show us all the modules that are currently installed on the system. So currently I will see that I have a few in here. Now, what you will notice is you actually don't see either of the Milestone PS Tools or the MIP SDK. You don't have to do this all the time, but you can actually do import module Milestone PS tools, and that will actually import that into your current console. I also could have just closed and opened PowerShell. That would have worked as well. But if I go back and look at Get module now, you'll notice that Milestone PS tools and the MIP SDK redistributable are both in here. This is also a great place to come see the version number. We do update this module every once in a while, and you can actually go on the PowerShell Gallery website and see the current version. You can always do an update module command to update that. So the first thing I have to do once I come in here is I need to connect to a management server. So the first one I'm going to connect to is actually a remote system that has some cameras on it. So I'm going to type in connect management server. Now I need to define what server I want to connect to. So I'm going to type in the server argument, and I'm going to type an IP address of the server I want to connect to. And then because I'm connecting remotely, I do need to provide a credential. So I'm going to type in credential, and I'm actually going to ask PowerShell to prompt me for my credential instead of me entering it in plain text for all of you to see. And I froze up PowerShell a little bit. Here we go. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. It's going to prompt me for my username and password. And now you'll see nothing happened. However, I'm actually connected to this remote server. I can tell that a number of different ways. I can actually type in a git site command, and that will actually tell me what system I'm connected to. So I'll actually see I'm connected to my MS Lab XProtect corporate system. But I also can do just something as easy as git hardware. And what you see is I just saw a bunch of text come across my screen, and this is showing me the detail about every hardware device I have on this system I'm connected to. Each one of these is its own object. It has different methods and different items inside of that object that I can utilize within the framework. As you can see, there's a lot of text that's on the screen, so maybe I want to display this in a little more manageable format. So I can actually pipe this git hardware command to something called select object, which is a built-in PowerShell method. And I only want to select the name and the IP address of the individual hardware. So now I have a list of all of my camera names and IP addresses in a nice list. And then maybe I even want to make this a bit prettier, and I can push this out to a pop-up called Out Grid View. This is actually going to pop up a nice little table. So if you did have a lot more data, you can actually filter through this and actually search on the data as well. Now, each piece of hardware, as you know, inside of XProtect has multiple devices underneath it. So we have cameras, microphones, speakers, inputs, outputs underneath them. So I actually have a command called get camera. However, since a camera is a sub-object of a piece of hardware, I actually need to pass the get camera command. I actually need to pass the get hardware command to the get camera command, actually pass the hardware objects to the camera command. So in order to do that, I can type in get hardware, and then I can pipe it simply into get camera. You'll see that gives us way too much data. It's going to show every camera device that is either enabled or disabled on my system. So how do I clean that up a bit? Well, I can actually pipe this into a where object, another PowerShell built-in commandlet. And I want to say the field enabled, which you can see right here in the last item that was displayed, where object enabled is equal to true. And maybe I just want a list of names that are all enabled. So I'm going to do select object, and I'm just going to select the name. So now I can see all of the names of cameras that are enabled on my system. And maybe I just want to find out how many cameras I have enabled on my system. I can use a little more logic within PowerShell, and I can just get a count. So I can see I have 18 camera devices actually enabled on my system right now. So far I've showed you a bunch of commandlets that are built into the PowerShell Milestone PS Tools module, as well as some commands that are built into PowerShell directly. So how can I get a list of commands that this module supports? Because in the introduction, I told you we support over 140 different modules, or I'm sorry, 140 different commandlets. So I can type in a PowerShell command called get command, and I can tell it what module I want to look up. So in this case, I'm going to look up the Milestone PS Tools module. If I go ahead and hit enter, I'll actually see the 141 different commandlets that are associated with this. So I can see everything from our Connect management server, if I can learn my alphabet. Okay, we're not alphabetical apparently. Connect management server. I can see everything from my Get camera to Get hardware, and a number of other different modules. I'm sorry, another number of other different commandlets that are in here. So how do I know what each one of these does? Well, PowerShell has a built-in functionality called Get help, and I can actually pass it a command. So in this case, what if I want to know what a Get camera report command does? I come down here, I type in Get help, and I type in Get camera report. First time you do this, it's going to download a bunch of help files. It might take a couple minutes, but after those are downloaded, you'll get a nice little synopsis of what this command does. So I can see that this gets a detailed report containing information about all the cameras on one or more recording servers. I can see the different syntax and different things I can do. Some of these things I can do are include disabled devices, including passwords, specifying specific recording servers. However, I'm just going to simply type in Get camera report. Now this is going to go through. It's going to take just about a minute, and it's going to go through my system and actually query all of the different devices on there. Again, I'm seeing a flood of text, so this is not incredibly useful to me at this time, but this is giving me a camera report. So how do I make this look a little bit better? Well, I'm going to pipe it out to a grid view. So out grid view. Now I'm going to see statuses of all my cameras pop up in real time. So now I can see how many channels are enabled on each camera, if it's enabled or disabled, what the state of it is, when it was last modified, the name, and a bunch of other information like resolution, codec, frame rate, where it's being recorded to, if motion is enabled or disabled, tons of data. I can also pipe this out into an Excel file. So I can do something like Get camera report, and I can push it into an Excel file or a CSV in this case. So I can do export CSV, which is a built-in command into PowerShell. And then I just need to simply give it a path. So desktop, and I'm going to call it camera report.csv. You'll notice there's a new file on my desktop here. And once this command finishes, I can go ahead and open it up. I'll see a CSV of all that same data I just saw on the screen a few minutes ago. And if I want to, I can actually copy this over to my main desktop. I got to go find it now. So my camera report here. I can actually open this in Excel, and now I can actually modify this in an Excel file and get rid of different columns, rows, filter on this, etc. So obviously that could be incredibly useful for doing just basic maintenance on the system, seeing what resolutions all your cameras are at, finding anomalies, finding outliers, those kind of things. So there's another command. There's another command within the Milestone PS Tools module that we're going to explore. And that's going to be an export hardware CSV file. So in order to figure out a little more about that and how that works, let's type in get help and do export hardware CSV. So we're going to see here, it does a basic hardware export into a CSV. It's going to include hardware name, address, MAC address, username, password, driver number, driver display name, recording server name, and recording server ID. So I can simply, however, in order to do this, I actually have to pass it the hardware to be exported. So in order to export every single device on my system, and you can see that here, by the way, input object hardware. In order to export all of the hardware on the system, I can simply do get hardware, and I can pipe that into a export hardware CSV and give it a path. I can go ahead and put this on my desktop. Now this is going to go through and it's going to take every piece of hardware I have on my system and it's going to put it into a CSV file. I'm going to leave that there for a little bit. I'm actually going to use a modified copy, but I'm going to leave that there for a little bit and we're going to utilize that a little bit later. So far I've been connected to a remote system. So when I connected, I had to specify a username and a password and the IP of the server I wanted to connect to, or host name of the server I wanted to connect to. I'm actually going to disconnect from the server. And I'm going to exit out of my PowerShell console. For the second half of this, I'm going to open up something called the PowerShell Isd. The Isd is a little bit more of a scripting environment. The bottom half of the screen is going to be a console. The top half of the screen is going to be used for code. And actually on the right, I have a nice little feature where I can actually see all the modules installed. And I can actually come here into Milestone PS Tools and I can see every module, every commandlet that's installed inside of this. So this can be useful if you like a graphic user interface. And the first thing I'm going to do is I need to reconnect to my management server. But instead of connecting to my remote management server, I'm actually going to connect to this local server. And I can tell I'm connected to this local server the same way I could tell I was connected to that remote server by typing in get site. And now I can see I'm no longer connected to my corporate MS Lab system, but I'm connected to this WS 2019 system, which is my local host here. So once I'm connected, let's go ahead and see what hardware is on the system. Well, I have nothing because I showed you earlier this is a brand new clean system. So now we just exported a hardware CSV a little while ago. So maybe I want to put those same cameras on the system. How can I do that? Well, I modified that CSV just a little bit. And I'm not going to open it up because it does have usernames and passwords inside of it. However, all I did was modify the recording server ID and name so doesn't utilize the same recording server name. And I'm going to go ahead and type in get help. And I'm going to type in import hardware CSV. And I'll see here that the import hardware CSV adds hardware to the Milestone VMS using a CSV file. The requirements are a path to the CSV, and you have to pass it a recording server if it's not specifically defined within the CSV, which it's not in this case. You'll see that it needs a recording server name, hardware address, hardware name, username, password, group path, and driver name. All of these, driver number, I should say. The username, password, hardware name, and hardware address are all inside of the CSV file, where recording server is not. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to actually type in a get recording server command. And this is actually going to pass me an object of what the recording servers I have attached to the system. I only have one recording server attached to the system. So what I can do is create a quick little variable. And I can actually type in get recording server. Yep, I'm failing at typing. Git recording server. And I can save that into that RS variable. And now I'm simply going to type in import hardware CSV, provided a path. On my desktop, I actually have a modified hardware CSV file. And I'm going to define the recording server I want this to go to. So in this case, RS. And all I'm going to do is simply hit enter. You're going to notice you get a kind of a dialog up top. This is basically utilizing our SDK add hardware wizard, and it's going to go through and add all of the hardware that I have inside of this CSV file to this system. This is going to take about probably another minute, maybe a little less. This is actually going through and doing the full add hardware functionality. So it is reaching out to the camera, connecting to it, adding to the system, adding it to device groups, enabling different channels, updating names. Okay, we're done. So if I go back into XProtect and I go ahead and refresh, you're going to see I have a number of cameras actually added now, 4 different cameras. So cool. Let's say I have, so obviously that's incredibly useful, right? Being able to bring in hardware through a CSV. Everything we've touched so far has all been basically utilizing pretty simple commandlets within the Milestone PS tools, as well as the PowerShell default commandlets. So the last couple pieces we're going to do is going to use a couple predefined scripts. And we'll kind of walk through these on a basic level and kind of talk about what they're doing. So this next script we're going to utilize is actually going to set up what we call the universal driver. Now, if you've ever set up the universal driver, this is an RTSP driver that allows you to bring in feeds from cameras that don't have native drivers. The only thing about the RTSP driver, it is a little bit of a little bit tedious to set up because there's different configurations and different things you have to do because we can't automatically discover these. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go through and actually get the recording server ID, which we already have actually, and we're going to pass that to the add hardware wizard, and we're going to add a web link RTSP feed. We're going to use default credentials, and we're going to add this to a group called demo. Actually, I'm going to change this on the fly right now, and I'm going to call it bunny. So I'm actually just going to run these first 2 lines. Actually, I'm just going to run these first 2 lines. And right, just don't need that in there. Run these first 2 lines. So we're actually going to add a new device to our system, and we can actually see that if we go in here, refresh. So now we have a new camera that's been added. That's currently not streaming because we haven't set up any of these settings within the settings tab. So I'm going to run the other 4 lines here, which basically is going to go through and set up 3 different values: the frames per second, the streaming mode, and the connection URI. And now if I come back into XProtect, I, in theory, should be able to watch a nice little movie about a bunny. So obviously I broke that script up, but if you had hundreds of cameras you wanted to add all through the universal driver, you can actually script that out and add them all fairly quickly without any manual clicking within the XProtect management client. Pretty cool, I think. So what about, I added just these 5 cameras right now, 4 cameras plus this online camera. What about adding permissions? Well, I can easily come in here and create a new role. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new role called the bunny role. If I go back into my role section now, I now have a new role called Bunny. I have no users in there yet. So now I want to use a built-in Windows user called Milestone and add it to that. Now I have a Milestone user inside of my Bunny role. And now I want to actually give permissions to every camera on my system for live viewing only for every user inside of that Bunny role. Now I can come over here to devices, and I can see, after I refresh, I can see that this user or these users now have permissions to every single camera for read and view live only. The last thing I'm going to show you today is an incredibly useful script. This is an example you will find on the GitHub link I sent you. And this is called Group Cameras by Models. And this is going to go through and actually create device groups for each type of model device you have added to the system. So I'll let you look through this code on your own if you're interested in it. But basically, I need to import this function because this is a function. So I'm going to go ahead and import this function. It's now imported into the system. And now in order to use this, all I have to do is type in group camera by model. It's going to ask me for a base path. This is going to be a name of a device group. So I'm just going to call it MGMT or management group. I'm going to hit enter. Now that went fairly quickly, but basically went through every device in my system, determined what the model was, and created a unique folder for it within my devices tab. So now if I go ahead and refresh this, you'll notice I have a new group called management. Underneath that management group, you'll notice I have different models. So I have an access model for 8207 and M2026, 1435, P1435, a FlexiDome, Bosch, and also a universal driver. This now grouped every single camera underneath there into its own individual group. Can do actually up to, I think 400 devices. Actually, can do more than that, but we'll actually break them up into the max number of devices that we can support changing the configuration on at a given time. So this becomes a very good way to come in here and basically make mass configuration changes. And the nice thing is, if you add new cameras, you can just come back and rerun the script and it will do it all over again. So last thing I'm going to do today, I'm going to undo all my hard work. I created a function called reset me. I'm going to import that in. If I want to delete all the hard work we did today, I'm going to go ahead and type in reset me. You see I get an error there, but this is actually working successfully. And I have now deleted every role and every device off my system. Of course, the system is not very happy about that. Okay. So there you go, clean system. Well, that's all I had today, guys. Like I said, coming up next month, we have a part 2 with my colleague, Carl. He is going to be diving a bit deeper into the function capabilities of PowerShell and Milestone PS tools, and hopefully, well, not hopefully, but he's going to be diving into kind of dissecting those and kind of teaching you how to write your own scripts and functions from this library. I may be sticking around. If you guys have any questions, just let me know. But otherwise, thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for coming to another 15-minute Feature Friday. Feel free to leave us any feedback in the chat or let us know. And if you have any questions, I will be glad to answer them. I see a couple in the QA box here, so just give me just a minute. All right. Josh gave me some feedback that I don't remember what it applies to, so I will See that? Oh, list available. I guess we were talking about when we had that. Let's say I want to run a report on all cameras and did not record any video for the last few hours. Is there a function for that? Yeah, so there is, Damon, if you're still on, there is a couple different ways to do that. There is an example script on the GitHub that will actually go back. Actually, I think it's on the knowledge base article page that will actually go through and look for no video at all. If you wanted to see no video in the last, within a time frame, I believe we could do that as well. I do believe it's possible. I don't know exactly. I don't know if we have a predefined script for that or if we'd have to kind of put that together. Yep, I found the semicolon. And yes, the group camera by model commandlet can be used and rerun to update the group. Yes, it will do that. When you import devices, do you have to be able to connect to them at the time of import? I do believe yes, because we're actually utilizing the SDK, and part of that is reaching out to the device. I don't think there is a way to add them in an offline state at this time. And regarding the sharing video, yeah, you can find that actually on our website. If you go back to our events and go back to this previous event, you'll be able to find that recording. I can specifically email you the link as well if you're interested. Okay, Josh, the question about the last recorded image, or the last, no recording, you can actually add an include playback info argument to the camera report, and that will actually give you an image. Well, actually, it won't give you an image, but it'll give you the last recording date. All right, and that's all the questions I see. There were a few coming in at the end. Some of those just thanks. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining. Again, check back with us next month, May 21st, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And you guys all have a great weekend. Thank you so much again for joining, and talk to you soon.